With me today is Steve Witte. He is the editor of the North American Journals of Prince Maximilian of Wied, Volume 1, May 1832 to April 1833. Steve, I don't think many people know that some Europeans came over as tourists, but you were telling me earlier that Prince Maximilian wasn't a tourist.
Well, Maximilian's a scholar. He is about the 8th out of 10 children in his family, a very wealthy, noble family in Germany, but he knew he would never inherit any political position. He decided from an early age that he was going to devote his life to science. He was born in 1782. His plans were slightly interrupted by the Napoleonic Wars. He spent a little time in the Prussian army and actually came out with the rank of major in the cavalry by the end of the wars. But he knew that science was his principal interest in life. Sure. Went to university and so forth. He was very much in tune and plugged in with the network of scientists in Europe at the time. And in those days, science was a lot more broad than now. Today we have geologists, botanists, chemists, people specialize. In Maximilian's day, it was possible to be a person who knew a lot about a lot of subjects. And that describes him very well. He's an ethnologist. His principal interest is in the native peoples of the Americas, but he's also a capable botanist, he's a capable zoologist, he's a bit of a geologist, he's a bit of a geographer, he's the whole package. And now I've just told you that how many different consultants we have to have in order to make this project work.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's also an artist because you have a number of illustrations from his journals in this volume.
Right. Now, it should be remembered that Maximilian found it necessary to hire an artist to accompany him. This would be Karl Bodmer, as we say it in Omaha, or Bodmer, as you'd probably say it in Germany, who produced a rather iconic series of images of Native Americans in the Great Plains. The photography not existing in the 1830s, Maximilian found it necessary to have someone to create a visual record of his expedition. But the Bodmers have been published in other books. And Joslin Art Museum, in cooperation with the University of Nebraska Press, published Karl Bodmer's North American Prints, Karl Bodmer's America. As my colleague, Marcia Gallagher, likes to put it, we've done well by Bodmer. Now it's time for Maximilian.
Right. Now, where exactly did he go in North America?
Well, this first volume will only take him as far as St. Louis. Okay. But his ultimate goal is going to be to go out onto the Great Plains. He's going to follow part of the Lewis and Clark route up the Missouri River from St. Louis to roughly about Fort Benton, Montana. Well, it wasn't Fort Benton then, it was Fort McKenzie, a fur trade post, and then he'll come back down and make his way back home to Germany. His principal objective, was to observe the native cultures of the Great Plains, peoples like the Mandans, the Hidatsas, the Blackfeet, the various branches of the Sioux Nation, and I'm leaving some out, but not meaning to be disparaging. Maximilian had actually made an earlier voyage to Brazil between 1815 and 1817, where he studied the native peoples of eastern Brazil. Came back to Germany, wrote up a book about his travels in Brazil, and then speculated as to whether the native peoples of North America might be related to the native peoples of South America. So he decided in the 1820s that he needed to come to North America to visit these peoples firsthand. And so that's what brought him to America in 1832. He's chagrined to find that he can't find out much about Indians in Boston or in Philadelphia or New York or Cincinnati or Pittsburgh. He doesn't meet his first live Indian, so to speak, until he's almost in St. Louis.
And so he had to go up the river to find out more.
Oh, yes. Now, he could possibly have decided to travel overland along in the Platte River Valley, along with William Drummond Stewart, a Scotsman who was traveling that area at the same time, and Stewart would be a tourist. But Maximilian found it better to travel on the Missouri River because he would have the resources of the American Fur Company at his disposal to help him. The fur company used a steamboat to supply their various posts along the Missouri River about as far as the Montana-North Dakota border. And so Maximilian and Bodmer and his hunter, taxidermist David Drydoppel, were able to ride the steamboat up the Missouri River. So they had a little easier than Lewis and Clark did.
Now, I am assuming that this is very valuable information that he collected, because a number of those Indian nations don't really exist anymore.
Well, they exist, but things are very, very different for them than in the 1830s. Probably the best example of what you mean by that is the Mandan people.
Yes.
Some of Maximilian's most valuable observations are from the winter he spent at Fort Clark, which is a fur trading post near the Mandan and Hidatsa villages in the Bismarck-Mandan area in North Dakota. In 1837, there was a terrible smallpox epidemic that very nearly wiped out the Mandans as a people. And so Maximilian's observations are sort of a last look at that society before the tremendous changes that epidemic wrought.
Mm-hmm. Now, you call this Volume 1. I take it you have more volumes coming up.
Well, Maximilian does. Actually, Maximilian organized his manuscript into 3 volumes, which are held at Joslin Art Museum in Omaha. So the contents of our Volume 1 largely follow the contents of his first volume. And so there will be a Volume 2 and there will be a Volume 3. And there are chapters within each volume, and it's Maximilian who decided where each chapter would begin and end.
Okay. So you were a very kind editor.
Well, in some ways. And we should remember this is a translation from German.
Yes.
And the journal manuscripts are written in a script that's no longer used in Germany. We're very, very fortunate that our translator, our present translator, Dr. Dieter Karsch, University of Nebraska, can read and write in a very close relative of Maximilian's script. So we rely on Dieter for the reading.
Okay. And then you come along and do the editing. Do you just excise repetitions, or what?
Editing isn't just a matter of textual presentation. In this case, it's also a matter of annotation, footnotes that explain what's going on with the text. And I don't do this alone. I do this for certain areas. My co-editor, Marcia Gallagher, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, is responsible for certain areas. I'm responsible for certain areas. I write the footnotes that explain geographic terms. Here's a good example for you. A river you've never heard of in Nebraska, the Niobrara, which empties into the Missouri along the South Dakota-Nebraska border. Maximilian doesn't call it Niobrara. He uses the old French name L'eau qui court, or running water river. Well, we need a footnote there that says Maximilian needs the Niobrara. That's where I come in.
Ah, okay. Well, I think you've done an excellent job. Witness the fact that the book has won Wrangler Award for 2009. And I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you.
Steve Witte has been here talking about the North American Journals of Prince Maximilian of Wied, Volume 1. You can find it in your library and your favorite bookstore.